Fine name, Arnin. A long time after Hanrahan had left Margaret Rooney's house, he was on the road near Collooney, and the sound of the birds singing in the thorn bushes that were white with blossom set him singing as he went.
It was to his own little place he was going.
It was no more than a cabin.
But that pleased him well.
For he was tired of so many years of wandering.
Although he seldom refused a welcome, and his share of what was in the house.
Yet it seemed to him sometimes that his mind was getting stiff like his joints, and it was not so easy as it used to be for him to make fun and sport through the night, and to set all the boys laughing with his pleasant talk.
And to coax the women with his songs.
And one day he had turned into a cabin some poor man had left to go harvesting, and had never come to again.
He was well pleased to have a little place for himself, where he could go in and out as he liked.
And put his head in his hands for the length of an evening, if the fret was on him.
And loneliness after the old times.
After a while, the neighbours began sending their children in to get some learning from him. And with what they brought, a few eggs or an oaten cake or a couple of suds of turf,
he made out a way of living.
And if he went for a wild day and night to the borough now and again, no one would say a word.
Knowing him to be a poet.
With wandering in his heart. It was from the borough he was coming that fine May morning.
Light-hearted enough, and singing some new song that had come to him.
When a hare ran across his path and made a way into a field through a loose stone in the wall, and he knew it was no good sign, a hare to have crossed his path.
And he remembered the hare that had led him away to sleep Echtge, the time Mary the Bell was waiting for him.
And how he had never known content for any length of time since then.
And it is likely enough they are putting some bad thing before me now. Then he heard a sound of crying, coming from the field beside him. And he looked. There he saw a young girl, sitting under a bush of white hawthorn, and crying as if her heart would break. Her face was hidden in her hands, but her soft hair, and her white neck, and the young look of her, put him in mind of Bridget Purcell, and Margaret Gillen, oh, and Maeve Kennellan, and Una Curry, and Celia Driscoll, and the rest of the girls he had made songs for.
And had coaxed the heart from with his flattering tongue. She looked up.
He saw her to be a girl of the neighbours, a farmer's daughter. What is on you, Nora?
Nothing you can take from me, Red Hanrahan.
If there is any sorrow on you, it is I myself who should be well able to please you. I know well what sorrow is in parting, and there's many a one I have saved from it with the power that is in my songs.
The girl stopped her crying and she said, "Oh, Hanrahan, I often heard you have had sorrow and persecution, and that you know all the troubles of the world since the time you refused your love to the queen woman in Sleeve Echtge, and that she never left you in quiet since. But when it is people of this earth that have harmed you, it is yourself knows well the way to put harm on them again. And will you do now what I ask you?"
I will do that indeed.
"It is my father, and my mother, and my brothers that are marrying me to old Paddy Doe because he has a farm of 100 acres under the mountain. And it is what you can do, Hanrahan. Put him into a rhyme, the same way you put old Peter Kilmartin in one the time you were young. Oh, that sorrow may be on him, rising up and lying down, that'll put him to thinking of Collooney churchyard, and not of marriage. And let you make no delay about it. For it is for tomorrow they have the marriage settled. And I would sooner see the sun rise on the day of my death than on that day."
I will put him into a rhyme that'll bring shame and sorrow over him. But tell me, how many years has he? For I'll put them into the rhyme.
He has years upon years. He is as old as you yourself, Red Hanrahan.
As old as myself.
Said Hanrahan, and his voice was as if broken.
As old as myself. There are 20 years and more between us. It is a bad day indeed for Owen Hanrahan the Red, when a young girl with the blossom of May in her cheeks thinks him to be an old man. And my grief, it put a thorn in my heart.
turned from her then, and went down the road till he came to a stone. And he sat down on it. For it seemed as if all the weight of the years had come on him in a minute.
And he remembered that it was not many days ago that a woman in some house had said to him,
"It is not red Hanrahan you are now, but yellow Hanrahan, for your hair is turned to the colour of a wisp of tow."
and another woman he had asked for a drink.
Had not given him new milk, but sour.
And sometimes the girls,
Would be whispering and laughing
with ignorant,
young men.
while he himself was in the middle of giving out his poems or his talk,
And he thought,
of the stiffness in his joints,
When he first rose of a morning.
and the pain in his knees.
after making a journey,
And it seemed to him that he was come to be a very old man, with cold in his shoulders and his speckled shins, and his wind breaking and he himself withering away.
And with these thoughts there came on him a great anger against old age, and all it brought with it. And he looked up, and saw great spotted eagles sailing slowly toward Ballygolly, and he cried out,
You too, eagle of Ballygolly, you're old, and your wings are full of gaps, and I'll put you and your ancient comrades, the pike of Castledorgan Lake, and the yew tree of the steep place of the strangers into my rhyme, that there may be a curse on you forever.
There was a thorn bush beside him to the left, flowering like the rest, and the wind blew little white blossoms over his coat.
May blossoms, said he, gathering them up in the hollow of his hand. You never know age because you die away in your beauty. And I'll put you into my rhyme and give you my blessing.
He stood up and plucked a little branch from the bush and took it in his hand. But it is old and broken, he looked going home that day, with the stoop in his shoulders and the darkness in his face.
When he got to his cabin, he wanted to make a poem, or a praise, or a curse.
And it was not long he wasn't making it this time.
For the power of the curse-making bards was upon him.
And when he had made it, he searched his mind.
How he could send it out over the whole countryside.
Some of his pupils began coming in then.
To see if there'd be any school that day.
Hanrahan sat down on a bench by the hearth, and they all sat round him.
They thought he'd bring out the Virgil.
Or the Mass book.
Or the Primer.
But instead he held up the little branch of hawthorn he had in his hand yet.
Children, this is a new lesson I have for you today. You yourselves and the beautiful people of this world are like this blossom. In old age is the wind that comes and blows the blossom away. And I've made a curse upon old age and upon old men. And listen now as I give it out to you.
And this is what he said.
The poet Owen Hanrahan under a bush of May calls down a curse on his own head because it withers grey, and on the speckled eagle cock of Ballygolly Hill, because it is the oldest thing that knows of carkent ill, and on the yew that has been green from times out of mind, by the steep places of strangers in the gap of the wind, and on the great grey pipe that broods in Castledorgan Lake, having in his long body a many a hook and ache. Ah! And curses he old Paddy Bruin of the Well of Bride, because no hair is on his head, and drowsiness inside. And Paddy's neighbour Peter Hart, Michael Gale his friend, because their wondering histories are never at an end. And then old Seamus Coonan, shepherd of the Greenland, because he holds two crutches between his crooked hands, and calls a curse from the dark north upon old Paddy Doe, who plans to lay his withering head upon a bristle of snow, who plans to wreck a singing voice and break a merry heart. He bids a curse hang over him till breath and body part. But he calls down a blessing on the blossom of the May, because it comes in beauty, and in beauty blows away.
He said it over to the children, verse by verse,
till all of them could say a part of it.
And some that were the quickest could say the whole of it.
That'll do for today, children. And what you have to do now is go out and sing that song for a while to everyone you meet and to the old men themselves.
I'll do that. I know Paddy Doe well. Last St. John's Eve, we went to his house and dropped a mouse down his chimney. But this is much better than a mouse.
I will go to the county of Sligo and I'll sing it in the street.
Do that and go into the borough and tell it to Margaret, Rooney, and Mary Gillis and bid them sing to it and make the beggars in the bucket sing it wherever they go.
The children ran out then, full of pride and mischief.
All out songs they ran.
And Hanrahan knew there was no danger, it would not be heard.
He was outside his cabin the next morning, waiting for his pupils to arrive,
And considering the place of the sun in the heavens, as whether it was time to begin.
when he heard a sound.
That it was like the buzzing of a swarm of bees in the air, or the rushing of a hidden river in the time of flood.
He saw then that there was a crowd coming up to his cabin from the roadside.
And he took notice that all the crowd was made up of old men, and that the leaders of it were Paddy Bruin, Michael Gill, and Paddy Doe, and there was not one in the crowd that had his hand on an ash stick or a blackthorn.
As soon as they caught sight of him,
The sticks began to wave hither and thither like branches in a storm.
and the old feet to run, he waited no
And
longer.
made off up the hill behind the cabin till he was out of their sight.
After a while, he came back round the hill, where he was hidden by a firs growing along a ditch. And as soon as he caught sight of his cabin, he saw that all the old men had gathered around it. And there was one of them just at that time, thrust in a rake with a wisp of lighted straw on it into the thatch.
My grief! I have set old age and time and weariness and sickness against me, and must go wandering again. And oh, blessed Queen of Heaven, protect me from the eagle of Ballygolly, the yew tree in the steep place of the strangers, and the pike of Castledarkin Lake, and from the lighted wisp of their kindred. Old men!